where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
Friday Java, 23rd of August, 2016, from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Network. Boston Red here on the Friday. As we normally do our magazine show, we have some interesting events here as the world turns, and I guess you'd say DJ Trump turns. There's a meeting going on in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. That is the Fed, their annual summer meeting in Jackson Hole. It is sponsored by the Kansas City Fed for inquiring minds. Of course, inquiring minds always want to know. The big question there is to raise interest rates or not to raise interest rates, actually to lower interest rates. We'll have that on Numbers Man, our macroeconomics program this weekend on WBRN and the Boston Red Network. Pro, and there is a con to that. We at the Numbers Man unit actually feel that raising interest rates is more appropriate than cutting. They cut 25 basis points, which is 0.25. That was the cut, and that was the first time they cut interest rate. The Fed, in 10 years, basically, since the Depression was on under Barack Obama. It greeted Barack Obama when he came into office. From the political part, there's also a meeting of the G7 nations, that is in France. President Macron has talked about the problems in the Everglades. That's basically 20 to 25% of our oxygen comes from the Everglades. Number of fires there. The right fascists in Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, had informed farmers to do what we used to call in the old days slash and burn. In other words, burn their fields. So you have all these fires there, thousands of them going on at once. For his part, the fascist Bolsonaro said that President Macron was, and I'm a little mispronouncing his name here, nonetheless was behaving like a colonialist towards Brazil. I didn't know that France ever occupied Brazil. That was actually Portugal. Anyway, and sometimes a slip of history, we see it coming all the time. And on the stop frisk police front in New York, the copper that killed Eric Garner was finally discharged, fired from the NYPD. Period. Paulino is now gone from there. And we have demonstrations nationally on gun violence. A big demonstration in El Paso. The March for Our Lives, that's Mr. Hogg's group, is coordinating activities all over America. In fact, they had one in El Paso. They had Gabby Gifford there talking about gun violence and what can be done about it. DJ Trump had talked about some type of gun legislation he was in favor of. Then he backtracked, and he's dealing with adding psychiatric institutions and no enhanced background checks. His position is squared with the NRA. So that, as far as that particular situation is going, and we'll have more on that on the week that was. That is on Saturday. We'll talk about it. We have our friends today from the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. Professor Amowitz of Amory University is again the guest columnist there. And as we normally do, we honor Heather Heyer, who was murdered by a white supremacist in Charlottesville, Virginia, the home of the University of Virginia. That, and by default, the Crystal Ball, that's Dr. Larry Sabato's excuse me, place, and we'll talk about that. And I don't think we have much polling today. Or do we have the polling? Anyway, we'll have to check into that. But we will be talking about homelessness in Austin, Texas, and various other cities, as some court cases going on there on the right of the homeless to literally sleep on the streets, which is heading to the Supreme Court. So let's get on with it. We'll just look at the baseball scores. And DJ Trump has announced, the Major League Baseball has announced players will no longer be able to play in Venezuela. But that's based upon DJ Trump's order. We'll have more of that about that on the week that was. But we'll get to some of the scores here. Hopefully at this, they're all complete, or just about complete. We're still debating what to do with the NFL and where they are in the scheme of things. Nonetheless, the Rays were in Camden Yards. The Rays end up with that game 4-2. At least the score we have here. The Blue Jays were shutting out the Dodgers in Los Angeles 2-0, but the Dodgers have moved on. There's no problem there. They I think about 18 games before they clinch. And in 10, the Sox played the Royals in Fenway Park. It was 5-4. Sox had 12 hits, no errors, and the Royals had 13 hits and no errors. The Cubbies played the Giants in Wrigley Field. It was 1-0. The Giants were shut out. The Nationals were in Pittsburgh. The score there 7-1. Cleveland was in New York and was shut out by the Mets in 8. There must have been a rain delay there. 2-0. The Marlins were in Atlanta 3-2. The Rockies were in St. Louis, Cardinals 6-5. The Tigers were in Houston, Astros 6-3 in that contest. The Rangers were on the south side of Chicago, White Sox 6-1. They had a good series against the Twins in Minnesota. The Yankees were in Oakland, and Oakland finally pulled one out 5-3. Mr. Tanaka was the loser in that contest. Mr. Roach was a winner. And that is the baseball scores from Thursday night. So we've accomplished something here. We've set up the baseball scores. Oh well. Sometimes we have to do something here. Let's go to the Austin story. Saga there of the homeless in Austin and the crisis. This is a national crisis, and the question asked here, this is from the Washington Post, should the homeless, let me get up here to it, should people have a right to sleep on city streets? Texas joins a national debate over the urban homeless crisis. This is by Tim Craig on the 22nd there. And they tell the story here. Christopher Paul, hasn't felt a police officer tapping his foot for more than a month. Tap, tap. That usually meant he had to. He was about to get another citation. He would never be able to pay for living on the streets for 5 years after Mr. Paul lost his graphics design job. Paul has been having undisturbed nights since the city council and the mayor erased restriction on public camping this summer, a move that the progressive lawmakers billed as humane and pragmatic reform of the criminal justice system. But the change has drew the ire of Republicans, local business owners who decry it as a threat to public safety and the local economy, exposing a partisan clash, as it mainly is, over how to manage poverty and affordable housing in American cities. Since Austin's public camping ban was relaxed, people can sleep much better in the open, and they are a lot safer than somewhere hiding in a back alley, said Paul, who estimates that he received 20 citations for illegal camping before the rule changed on July the 1st. He's 50 years old, and he was sleeping on a sidewalk because it was 100 degrees in Austin. And some shop owner named Craig Stately stood a few feet away. Hit my tenses here on Congress Avenue, reconsidering his party affiliation. I got 2 emails last month from customers who said, I can't go to your store anymore because it smells like urine. Stately, who operates Royal Blue Grocery. I'm a Democrat at heart. I've been in Austin, Texas for 30 years. But I am telling you, I'm feeling a lot more red these days when it comes to my business. An estimate of 22 homeless people in Austin that sleep on the streets of makeshift tent cities has been the latest flashing point in this national debate. Other cities, Boise, Idaho, plans to appeal ruling to the Ninth Circuit, that's in San Francisco. The ruling would determine that criminalizing public sleeping is unconstitutional, and when it is inadequate shelter space. Republicans have made the nation's growing homeless problem a political weapon, characterizing it as a fatal liberal politics. Well, that in itself is a mischaracterization. It is a failing of national politics. Look at Los Angeles with tents and horrible conditions. That was DJ Trump speaking in Cincinnati in the state of Ohio. Look at San Francisco. Well, San Francisco, the problem there is actually two of his character, Gavin Newsom, who used to be the mayor there. When asked about Trump's comments, he said that Democratic policies have fueled the economic resurgency of cities that has caused a short-term increase in homeless. That is factually incorrect. In San Francisco, Newsom was one of the people that pushed park benches to have dividers on them, and even floated a scheme that the homeless could no longer panhandle, that they would receive services from NGOs or non-profits that served the homeless. So he's part of the problem. California is spending an additional $1.7 billion to address housing affordability. The problem there is that they're not addressing it properly. The solution to the homeless problem is very simple. In cities that have space, is build housing, hundreds and if thousands of units of affordable housing. And that would mean SROs, we used to call single room occupancy, situations for families, of course, apartments there. In Austin, Wheelchair Abbott, he's the governor, threatened to push the GOP legislature to pass laws overriding Austin's. So they're making a political environment, and it always was political. I misspoke there, but the problem is they are trying to call it liberal overreaching. It's not overreaching. People should be able, and people were for many, many years in America, had the ability to sleep on sidewalks. The problem is that the city also needs to maintain the sidewalks. Mayor Adler there, the real answer is not just moving people from there to over there and back again. The real answer is giving them the services they need. He's no doubt he's right about that. And this is previously the city prohibited sitting or lying down on public sidewalks or sleeping outdoors in, in downtown Austin, where an influx of well-paid workers have driven up the cost, and that is the issue right there, income inequality. They issued this is Austin PD, 18,000 citations, which costs as much as $500, that obviously a homeless person couldn't afford. Back to the question of cash bail here. Those cited didn't show up for 90% of the time. That was according to the city auditor, concerned that those criminal records make it harder for homeless people to find jobs and housing. The council amended the ordinance to allow loitering in if not any individual is not posing a threat to safety, etc., and impeding reasonable use of a public area. Overnight camping is prohibited at the city parks and at the city hall. Interesting. Anyway, they also tell the story of somebody named Alvin Sanderson, who lived in Austin streets since he was released from prison 2014, so that'd be 5 years. Thinks the new approach is saving lives after receiving 2 citations for public camping. Slept in a drainage ditch to avoid the police. He was awakened by a thunderous wall of water that crashed down the creek bed during a flash flood, and he was almost swept away. And no doubt, in that type of city there, a massive encampment has been erected near Muriel, honoring 2 Texas music legends, Janis Joplin and Willie Nelson. And, of course, the business types have a backlash. There are about 500,000 homeless people in the U.S., that's according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. 25% of those are not sleeping in shelters. Well, there are no shelters for them to sleep in. Debate over the bans triggered a far-reaching federal lawsuit that's out in Boise, Idaho, where the ban was ruled a violation of constitutional rights against criminal unusual punishment, because sleeping is a biological necessity, no doubt about that. And the city attorney of Boise said courts should stop usurping the role of local governments. Local control, that's been an argument for a very long time in regulating health and safety. That is Evangelist noting that homeless camping in Los Angeles and elsewhere has been battling outbreaks of disease. That is only, we need to control those issues at local government. That's what Evangelista says there. She's partnering with attorney, and this was the attorney, and his wife was, of course, killed on a plane 9/11. Theodore Olson, who argued the Supreme Court that mandated same-sex nationwide case. On a recent morning, in Austin, Curtis Underwood, he's 49 years old, was sitting on 6th Street with a bloody nose. I don't know what that has to do with anything. We'll wind this up there. The mayor said Austin is planning to spend $30 million more, but Adler noted that the state funding has been stagnant. No doubt about that. There's not any state funding. It's a situation at Amber Hall. She's 38 years old, another homeless person sitting in a camp while 5 men were passed out at her feet after smoking synthetic cannabis. Anyway, at least they are still alive. Homeless residents have nowhere to go. That was from Michael Sherman. He's 40 years old, a graphic designer who moved to Austin from Fairfax, Virginia. So it doesn't bother me if they're lying around. Well, yeah, it's like cities in India where people lie around. I suppose, I don't know if they can panhandle or not. And now they put in here that D.C. houses homeless in upscale apartments. Now police visits the building have nearly quadrupled. Well, that's not unusual. That's since 2006. There's some retraining going on there. Half of the nation's unsheltered homeless live in California. That's roughly, my count is, half of 500,000 people, 250,000 people in California. Raising the minimum, a booming economy is there's nowhere in the U.S. Working full-time minimum wage people can afford a two-bedroom. They can't even afford an SRO or a single room. Anyway, that does it for our homeless segment here. And excuse me. Oh, sinus is kicking in today for some reason. This is an assessment to Congress. Part 1, point in time estimate. This was done in December. I want to think that we reported this before. And they acknowledge, obviously, the people that were responsible for it there. And we'll get to the key findings. That's as far as we'll go. On a single night, this is in 2018, roughly, that's where they got to 553,000 people. About two-thirds, 65,000, were staying in shelter locations. 65%, emergency shelter transitional housing. About a third, 35%, were in on-shelter locations such as on the street, abandoned buildings, etc. Homelessness increased modestly for the second year in a row. The number of homeless people on a single night increased by 0.3% between 2017 and 2018. Now, we don't have 2019 here. Between 18 and 17, the on-shelter population increased by 2%, or 4,300. That's not very many people at all. Over half of all unsheltered people are in continuals of care that encompasses the nation's largest cities. Increased numbers of individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness was the single case for national increase in all people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. Pretty way of saying they don't have a home. Needlessly, the number of unsheltered individuals in 2018 was 11% lower than in the Depression when it started in 2007. Those people have died. The people experiencing homelessness in families with children continues to decline by 2%. There's been some work done there. And by 23% between 2007, the Depression, 2018, more than 180,000 families with children were experiencing homelessness. Most people experiencing homelessness were staying in shelters, temporary locations. Now, let me just grab some other things here, and we'll move away from this. On any single night, this is in 2018, 36,000 people were experiencing homelessness as unaccompanied youth, that is, people under the age of 25. Most unaccompanied youth, 89%, were between the age of 18 and 24. Just over half of unaccompanied youth, were sheltered, 51%, a much higher rate than for people experiencing homelessness, as 35%. Number of individuals with chronic patterns of homelessness increased by 2%. But is 26% lower than it was in the Depression. African Americans are considerably overrepresented in the homeless population, while 13% of the population of African Americans account for 40% of all people experiencing homelessness, and 51% of people experiencing homelessness as members of families with children. In contrast, 6 in 10 do so as individuals are Europeans. 3,900 people were staying in shelters out of January of 2008. Specifically, were people displaced by presidential national disasters. A little different there. Struck by Hurricane Harvey and Nate. That's in the western Falls there. And we won't get into the definitions of those that unfortunately were homeless. Now, this is one here. A federal judge has received a link to a hate group, a link to an anti-Semitic blog post. It came from the Department of Justice. Interesting here. Morning briefing came every day, seemingly clocked full of news fit to see by workers at the Justice Department Executive Office for Immigration Review. That's the judges. Regularly topping 24 pages. The memo includes summaries of articles from outlets, national and local, covering topics like legal news, enforcement news, police and legislative news. On Monday, tucked between the stories from the Washington Post, Public Radio, the briefing includes a summary and a link to a blog from the Southern Poverty Law Center that had designated a hate group. Vidaray.com, frequent platform for white nationalists espouting anti-Semitic and anti-immigration rhetoric. Videra posts single out immigration judges by name, using their photos and referring to them with anti-Semitic slurs. The Department of Justice sent the briefings to all of the workers in that department. That would be some 400 immigration judges. And named and pictured derogatory posts also received a link this week from their employer. The brief was circulated the same week as DJ Trump faced accusations of anti-Semitism for asserting that Jewish people who vote Democrat showed disloyalty for praising Henry Ford. Henry Ford was a vehement anti-Semitic person. It came as the Justice Department moved to possibly decertify the union that represents federal immigration judges, which could silence a group critical of some of the administration's policies. National Association of Immigration Judges, that's what they were talking about, blasted the briefing in a letter. Their director, James McHenry, and Judge Ashley Tubador, the group's president, and one of the judges highlighted in the articles. The post featured links and content directly attacking sitting immigration judges with racial, ethnic, and slurs labeled Tartarish. Tubador said in the letter, with negative affected the word I got to pronounce this, but anyway, it's Kritarch, Katricious. Anyway, is a biblical reference for a system of rules by judges in ancient Israel. Highly offensive and anti-Semitic, she wrote. And the Vidara use of the term in a prerogative manner casts Jewish history in a negative light as an anti-Semitic Trump of Jews seeking power and control. BuzzFeed reported this. The Department of Justice condemns anti-Semitism in the strongest terms. That is from the press secretary told the Post. Well, why was that? Troubadour asked the organization to issue an apology to all EOIR workers, particularly the impacted immigration judges, as Thursday even Troubadour had not received a formal apology. The union called for immediate steps to ensure such posts and content is not enshrined as a legitimate news source in the future. Monday was a fire trial, and the first time the office briefing included questionable content, said an immigration judge named Matthew Harpork there. Harpork publishes in April, published every brief since 2018. He said he was appalled at how many stories from the Daily Caller, that's a right-wing publication, and Breitbart News. And another item that stood out to him was a link to Fox News interview with Chris Kobach. Kobach was a former secretary of Kansas it was in the governor's race, got his ass kicked there. Anyway, let me finish this up. So these are some of the things that out here. In a letter, Troubadour said the union supports the First Amendment and the right to freedom of expression, but the Department of Justice used its authority to legitimize and provide respectability to sites under the guise of news runs counter to the American ideas of equality under the law. No doubt. This is a situation, not only the immigration judges union is being attacked, but they are being attacked with these anti-Semitic tropes from Videra organization. We'll give a little bit of the background. Won't spend very much time on that. Virginia Videra, hope I'm pronouncing it VDAR, on one of the legacy white nationalist friendly website called Videra. Now this is the website. This is the one. Now Larry Kredlow, he's an economic advisor to old DJ Trump, had a publisher over for dinner early this month who provides a platform. This guy's name is Brimlow, Peter Brimlow, who claimed he known for decades. He said he wasn't aware that for nearly 20 years old, Brimlow ran a website, Videra.com, that promotes white identity politics. This followed the firing of a speechwriter for DJ Trump for appearing at a conference with Brimlow. So what is just Videra anyway? The virtual update of the DARE program, Videra. Videra is an anti-immigrant website named after Virginia Dare, the first English baby born in what is now the U.S. Nothing is known about her other than her name and date of her birth, but it hasn't stopped white nationalist supremacist speculation. Anyway, 1587, a group of English explorers arrived at the coast, what is now North Carolina, to start a settlement. They had been others on successful settlements there. Anyway, within a month, this Eleanor, she was the wife of John White, brought his pregnant daughter Eleanor Dare and her husband to the thing. Anyway, gave birth. White wrote in a journal, and Ashes Dare, one of the sisters, was delivered a daughter. Anyway, I'm not sure about all this. When the baby in Roanoke colony at the time, some of the neighboring Aboriginal tribes with whom previous English explorers had fought didn't exactly welcome their arrival. 4 days after Virginia was born, White returned to England to get help. That went badly too. White arrived in the middle of a war between England and Spain. So anyway, that's kind of the story of what happened here. Part urban legend, etc. Virginia Dare became popular after the height of Jim Crow. We have Sally Cotton, the epic poem, The White Dove. In Virginia, it's taken by friendly Crotonians who marvel her beauty and her whiteness, while the babe of Roanoke grew in strength and wondrous beauty like a flower of the wildwood bloomed beside the Indian maids. And finish that up there. Of a noonday sky was mirrored in her eyes the limpid blueness. Anyway, that is the story of this Dare thing. So we're having all kinds of white supremacist thing, even coming in from Credlow. It's a very bad situation there. Let me just check what we have from a Real Clear Channel. Probably not a lot here. What we don't have in polling here, we'll come back on Thursday. Well, we do have some new polling here from Thursday. Actually, we do. Sorry about that. This is Trump versus Biden in Arizona. This is from OH Predictive Insights. Has Biden up by 245-243 in Arizona with DJ Trump. For Bernie Sanders is in Arizona, Trump 44, Sanders 34, DJ by 4. And on Elizabeth Warren, he's 44-43. That's a dead tie there. On Kamala Harris, he's up by 8. Buttigieg by 5. That is in Arizona. His approval rating for Monmouth College there is at 41. Rasmussen still at 48. That was on Thursday. And let me just quickly move here. CNN also has him at 41. The Economist YouGov, I think we gave this. This is nationwide. Biden's up by 3. He has 22. Bernie Sanders has 19. And Liz Warren, effectively statistically tied at 18. Kamala Harris at 8. Buttigieg at 8. And Beto at 2. And Senator Booker at 2. Also in that poll. CNN at 41, also 42 at the Morning Consult. That is Politico, and he's 42 at Reuters. YouGov had him at 40. And the generic ballot, Democrats are up by 8 on it. That is from the Economist YouGov situation there. Now we won't do the crosstabs here. We'll do that on Friday. Jobber, grab us marketing, nonpartisan research. This is a Republican poll here at 926 registered voters. This is in the state of Nevada. Joe Biden has 25% there. Liz Warren 15%. Bernie Sanders 10%. 9% are on Sure. 9% for Kamala Harris. Tom Steyer has 6%. Buttigieg, what is he? At 5. Cory Booker at 2. A lot of 2%ers going here. Amy Klobuchar also at 2. That is in Nevada. And earlier we had Emerson polling here. We won't get into that one. Well, our friend Abigail Spangenberger, we'll catch up with her on another broadcast. And we'll get, we won't do Karl Rove today either, to the University of Virginia. I'm not sure where they are right now. We'll find them. Not the one you think. This is again from Professor Amowitz. He's a senior type, writing on the 22nd of August 2019. More Republicans identify as conservatives than Democrats identify as liberals. Liberals are a big problem within the party, specifically in California. This has led to questions about whether ideological issues in the Democratic Party could make it hard for the party to rally around its eventual nominee. However, Democrats are actually more united on individual issue positions than Republicans, which means that Democrats are less divided than ideological self-placement suggest. Which Republicans may be more divided than Democrats. In the 2020 contest, Democratic presidential nominees feature more than 20 candidates with a wide range of ideologies. Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, and some of the moderate candidates, but he's listing candidates that are really not in the game. Like Bullock of Montana, he's not in. Delaney is not in the game either. The first round of debates exposed major differences amongst candidates. Well, amongst survival candidates, a little bit different there. A number of pundits and political observers have argued that concerns about potential moderate defections are well-founded because the Democratic voters are sharply divided along ideological lines. They point to recent polls showing that while a large majority of Republicans describe themselves as conservative, fewer than half of Democrats describe themselves as liberal. It really doesn't matter very much. The liberal progressive dynamic, and if you look at Bernie Sanders, his polling, Elizabeth Warren, they are progressive. They are not standard liberal. They have what's progressive social democrats. Let's get to this. Liberals' identification in the Democratic Party is 47%, 4% in the Republican, moderates are 35% in the Democratic Party, and 27% in the Republican Party, conservatives 18% in the Democratic Party, basically about 70% in the Republican Party. Ideological identification of registered Democrats by demographic characteristics. Younger Democrats 18 to 20, 71% are moderate, 22% are liberals, And I don't like this liberal thing here, so we need to rethink this. The 30s to 29, 52% are liberals. Doesn't tell me who is progressive. 40 to 49, 50% there. 50 to 60. What's in the Democratic Party? 35% and 38. That's pretty good. 42% with some college. 58% college graduates. Of Europeans, 53%. African Americans, 33%. And Latinos, 42%. Let me just make sure of that. That's groupings registered here, and the liberals are 33%. That is not good for African Americans at that thing. And for African Americans, 31% are moderates, 36% are conservatives, as in the Democratic Party. And for Europeans, 11% are conservatives there. And for Latinos, 23% are conservatives, 35% moderates. Higher level of progressives within the Latino scale. Party agreements along registered Democrats and Republicans there. We look at abortions, Democrats 82% there. Republic 58%, that's fairly high. What they call black rights, 85% of Democrats, 65% of Republicans. Gun control, basically about the same, 78, 79. Immigration, 50% of the Democrats identify there. And, let's see. 39% of Republicans, 60% of the Republicans, business regulation, expect that. And 68% of the Democrats. Healthcare, a very large situation for Democrats, 85% of the Democrats and 72% of Republicans. And the average is 75% Democrats identify policy agreement and 62% of the Republicans. And they give the sources here to that particular situation, a survey from Real Clear Politics. Policy liberalism of registered Democrats by ideological identification. And we won't give all of these, but for abortion, 89% of the liberals, 81% of the moderates, 70% of the conservatives. Black rights, 91%, 81, and 75 for the conservatives within the Democratic Party. Gun control, 86% of the liberals and 74% of the moderates, and 64%, not a lot there, 10% there. On immigration, the liberals are 58% and 44% of the moderates and 40%. Not much difference between the moderates and conservatives on immigration. Healthcare, 75% of the Republicans and 81% of the moderates, 92% there. The grand total, 82% of the liberals and 71% of the moderates, 62% of the conservatives. And we won't go into the age group. Well, maybe, I'm not sure what page this is not. Approval of Trump, 1% of the liberals, 26% of the moderates, and we can't give a conservative percent here. That's of the liberals. Conservatives, we don't have anything there. The moderates, 3% approval of DJ Trump, 42% of the moderates, and 85% of the conservatives. This is by ideology. Anyway, conservatives 9% of the liberals and 59% of the moderates and 78% of the conservatives. This is from, again, this is a Pew Center research survey back in 2018. Anyway, the conclusion here, when it comes to ideological identification, Democratic voters are far more divided than Republicans. Around two-thirds of Republican voters identify as conservatives, while fewer than half of Democrats. Many observers of the current presidential campaign cite this factor to argue that ideological divisions are a serious potential threat to Democratic unity. I kind of doubt that in the sense, but a closer examination of recent polling data indicates that when it comes to specific policies, abortion, gun control, healthcare, Democratic voters are actually considered less divided than Republicans. No doubt about that. And now also, when you place these people as liberals, with some neoliberals, and you have progressives there who are social democrats. Example of that is Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. The liberals there are Senator Booker of New Jersey, and several of the others. We'll leave Beto O'Rourke with the progressives, and then we'll look at some of the other. Amos Klobuchar would be with the liberals, and then you'd have the conservatives, people like Delaney, used to be in Maryland. He would be a conservative person, not a liberal person. This is in the Democratic, but he really doesn't count. So you could basically say that Buttigieg is somewhere as a moderate Democrat at best. Jerry Pippen would, the late Jerry Pippen would call him a conservative Democrat. So these are some ways of looking at these people, but how they will round out, a lot of it would depend on who the party's nominee is. And what we look at Cranston Analytics is the national polls, how people are doing nationally, how Bernie is stacking up, how Liz Warren is stacking up, how Joe Biden is stacking up, etc. And then we look at specific states such as Texas, Arizona, Nevada, and we'll have more of this on tomorrow, the week that was. So this is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippen broadcast booth on the 23rd of August, 2019. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the week that was, which is published on a Saturday. And then we have Numbers Man now, incidentally reminding you that we have an open source report. It went up on Thursday from WBRN and the Boston Red Network. It can be found also at iHeart, at Twitter, Spreaker, YouTube. All these broadcasts are there. And on our Twitter feed, which is Boston Red. And on Facebook at the Boston Red page, you'll find these also. And you can find on the RSS feed. I think we need to do something a little tinkering with the RSS feed anyway, nonetheless. And also you can, let's see, where else did we? At Google Podcasts. We also have one this week we did on podcast, internet radio podcast, and more podcasts. That is on the Boston Red side. We invite you to tune into that.